It's a sad reality that many married couples who would like to have children find themselves unable to do so for various medical reasons. Now, with that, the scientific community has developed various techniques for trying to help these couples to conceive and have a child. One of those, which we'll be discussing today, is called in vitro fertilization. I think a simple breakdown of the terms could be helpful here, or at least looking at the term vitro. It's simply a Latin word that means glass. So in vitro fertilization refers to that process of the fertilization of the egg by sperm taking place in a petri dish or in a test tube. In vitro fertilization is a simple process where sperm will be collected from the husband and eggs or ovum will be collected from the wife. In the context of that test tube I spoke of, a scientist will then have conception take place. He'll bring the egg and the sperm together. So now we have a human life. We have an embryo here, or embryos, depending upon how many eggs are fertilized. And then those embryos, or an embryo, is implanted in the uterus of the woman, and the natural process of development and birth will follow. The Catholic Church is against in vitro fertilization, and for several reasons, and so we'll sort of go through some of those. To begin with, we look at the collection process in which sperm is taken from the man. The typical way in which sperm will be taken is through masturbation. And of course, the Church teaches that masturbation is a grave moral evil, as it's an offense against the dignity of the human body. It's an offense against the sexual act and as what God intended that to be. Also, there's what we call heterologous in vitro fertilization, where in some cases the husband is unable to produce any sperm. And as a result, they will seek a third party, another man, to donate his sperm to fertilize the egg of the woman. Of course, this process is an offense against the fidelity of the husband and the wife who have vowed themselves to one another. Now, as far as conception taking place in a test tube, we can look at several issues here as well. For one, that child that is being conceived has a dignity as a human person, and in keeping with that dignity is the right that the child has to be conceived and to develop within the womb of his or her mother. But we see, of course, that conception is taking place outside of the bodies of his parents. Instead, it's being taken place in a scientific setting. And also, this is an offense against what we would call the procreative meaning of sexuality. Every conjugal act, sexual act of a husband and wife should be procreative and unitive. However, the proper dignity that should be given to this procreative element is not being recognized there, as the procreative element has been separated from the conjugal act and is taking place again in this sort of just cold test tube. Now, the other issue we should look at there as well is that typically parents would be co-creators with God. However, in this instance, the parents are being separated. Their role as co-creators is separated from the act of conception. And so instead, a scientist has become sort of the sole decisive factor there of where life will be given. The other issue that we want to look at is what is being done with all of these embryos that are produced, keeping in mind that life begins at conception. Typically, more than one embryo may be implanted in the woman's uterus, as there's a greater chance of successful development and birth taking place. In some cases, though, more than one embryo will develop properly, and then the issue becomes, does the woman want to have multiple children or not? And in some cases, the woman will make the unfortunate decision to abort one or more of the embryos that has begun to develop because she's chosen to only have one child. And of course, abortion is a grave moral evil. The other issue is that even if those embryos are not implanted, what do we do with these embryos that we call extras? And it really is terrible for us to even refer to a human life as an extra, but in many cases those extra embryos are either frozen or simply discarded. And of course, that's not in keeping with the dignity that each of those human persons, each of those human lives is due. And so this is a very basic understanding of in vitro fertilization, by no means exhaustive. If you would like a deeper look at this issue, I would recommend that you check out a church document called Donum Vitae, the Gift of Life. And certainly there you can find a lot more information.